Hello, children. How are you? I hope you're fine, healthy, and safe at home. You're missing your classes, so we are trying to help you out through online classes. Children, the syllabus of 10th standard history, the major part, the first part, deals with the freedom struggle of the Indians. Right from 1857, that is the first war of independence, till the Indians got independence in 1947. It was a long story of struggle of the Indians. Today we'll discuss about the first topic, that is the first war of independence. India's first war of independence, or the revolt of 1857. You know that the Britishers came to India as traders. The name of the company was East India Company. When they came to India, they were just traders to make profit from India. But gradually, they became the rulers and masters of our country. They exploited the Indians. They ruled over nearly 200 years. And this caused widespread discontent among the Indians. The Indians were not happy. All sections of people were not happy with the British rule. But they did not have the courage to oppose the Britishers. Later, they took courage and revolted against the Britishers. And that is the story of the First War of Independence. But why did they revolt? Why did they oppose? There were various causes for this revolt. There were political causes, social and religious causes, economic causes, military causes, and an incident took place in 1857 that became the immediate cause of the First War of Independence. Now we start with the political causes. Doctrine of lapse. Now, what was this doctrine of lapse? Lord Dalhousie, when he was the Governor General of India, he introduced this doctrine of lapse. According to doctrine of lapse, any Indian ruler, if a Indian ruler, died without a natural heir to the throne, that means the successor to the throne, his kingdom would be annexed by the Britishers. That means the Britishers would confiscate his kingdom. Lakshmi Bai, the Queen of Jhansi, became a victim of this doctrine of lapse. Many other princely states were confiscated by the Britishers adopting this doctrine of lapse. For example, Jhansi was one of them, Nagpur, Satara. Lakshmi Bai had an adopted son, and this adopted son, was not considered as the real successor of Jhansi. So, Rani Lakshmi Bai became a bitter enemy of the British. Same thing happened to Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Baji Rao Peshwa II. He was not considered by the British as the next Peshwa. So the doctrine of lapse made both Nana Sahib and Lakshmi Bai bitter enemies of the British. Then the British annexed Awadh, the kingdom of Awadh, which is modern Lucknow, by giving the reason that the kingdom was not ruled properly by the ruler, on the pretext of misrule by the ruler. Then Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, Lord Dalhousie in 1849 announced that the successors of Bahadur Shah Zafar would not be allowed to use the Lal Killa as the imperial palace or the royal palace. They were shifted to a place near the Qutub Minar. Then, in 1856, Lord Canning announced that the successors of Bahadur Shah Zafar would not be allowed to use the imperial titles against their names. These two announcements humiliated the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar. Now, about the social and religious causes, some of the social reforms introduced by the British were not liked by the Indians. For example, the British banned the practice of sati, which was prevalent in the society, and they introduced Widow Remarriage Act. Both were not liked by the Orthodox Indians. Then the British introduced Western education and English language as they wanted educated Indians to work for their East India Company. Now, introduction of Western education and English language was not liked by the Indians. Why? Because they thought that the Britishers were trying to insult Islam and Hinduism. Then, introduction of railways and telegraph system was also not liked by the Indians. They thought the Britishers were trying to humiliate their religion and they wanted to convert the Indians into Christianity. Naturally, people were not happy with these changes. Now, various economic causes were also there. The Britishers came as traders and they made a very big profit from India. India was their colony. They took raw materials at a very cheap rate from India. They took to England and made a big profit from this. And they made India literally a dumping ground for the British goods. The Indians were forced to buy the British goods at a higher price. Then, those days, Indian textile had a very good market in foreign countries. The British textile industry, when the industry could not compete with the Indian industry, they imposed heavy duty on Indian textile and the British goods were exempted from the duty. So this hampered the Indian industries. Not only this, the Britishers increased the land revenue. This affected adversely the poor farmers. The farmers were forced to grow indigo because indigo was needed by the Britishers for their textile industry. So these were the various economic causes. Now, military causes. The Britishers introduced an act. Act is a rule that it was called the General Service Enlistment Act. According to this act, an Indian soldier he had to go to foreign countries on duty. And those days, it was considered as a taboo. It was a bad omen for the Indians. They did not want to cross the seas, but they had to go to abroad on duty. So the Indian soldiers were also not happy. Then the salary of the Indian soldiers was much less than the British soldiers. British soldiers used to earn much more than the Indian soldiers doing the same work. Then there were some strategic areas which were controlled by only Indians. And in the British Army, many Indians were there. Indian soldiers were more in number in the British Army, so this gave them courage to oppose the Britishers. And these were the long-term causes of the revolt of 1857. Now, apart from this, an incident took place at Barrackpore. What happened? The Britishers introduced a new type of rifle which was called the Enfield rifle. And the cartridge or the bullet which had to be used for the rifle, the soldiers had to bite it open. There was a cover, so they had to bite it open to use the bullet for the rifle. And a rumor spread. There was a rumor that the cartridge was greased by the fats of cows and pigs. You know, cows are worshipped by the Hindus and pigs a bad omen for the Muslims. So this change hurt the religious sentiments of the Indian soldiers, both the Hindu soldiers and the Muslim soldiers. They refused to use the bullet, the new Enfield rifle. Now at Barakpur, on 29th April 1857, a soldier named Mangal Pandey, a Brahmin soldier, when he was forced to use the bullet and the rifle, and he refused. When he was forced, he led an attack on the British officers. Immediately he was arrested and later he was hanged to death. This news spread like a wildfire and the revolt broke out immediately. But the revolt was easily suppressed by the Britishers. The Indians could not get the freedom. Now, the British scholars and the Indian scholars differ in their ideas about the nature of the revolt. According to the British historians and scholars, it was just a sepoy mutiny and we cannot call it a first war of independence. Why? Because according to the British historians, only a handful of soldiers were involved. It did not touch everywhere, all the parts of the country. All the Indians were not involved and it was easily suppressed by the British. But the Indian historians and scholars are of the opinion that this revolt, it was the first war of independence because it paved the way for many more national movements in the future. Indians did not lose courage. They continued their struggle till they get independence in 1947. So children, today this much is enough. In the next class, I will tell you about the impact of the revolt. So take care. Goodbye.